From beanies to carry bags and from shoes to caps, browse our shop now at tntradio.live. Deconstructing psyops, propaganda, and mainstream media garbage. Connecting the dots. You're with Matt Ehret and Connecting the Dots on today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
All right, welcome to this week's Connecting the Dots on TNT Radio. I'm once again your host, Matt Ehret, and joining me today for my first guest is Anton Chaitkin. I mean, I don't feel bad calling Anton Chaitkin a legendary historian. Before I was even born, Anton was already researching, mapping out, publishing material on some of the best research that I've ever come across in terms of understanding the nature of this thing that has recently been dubbed the deep state. But it's not. I mean, it's an elusive word, deep state. It's a recent word, but there was an understanding that there was a fifth column in America, that not everything was resolved after 1776, that there was this other thing that was not American in its heart. Perhaps it involved people born in America. It is multi-generational, but it is not directed from anything, and it does anything American, and it doesn't care about American interests. If anything, the purpose of this is to erase what was brought into the world in 1776. And so Anton has written books like Treason in America, which I've read several times, high value, back in 1984. More recently, Anton has written Who We Are, America's Fight for Universal Progress from Franklin to Kennedy, Volume 1, leading up from the 1750s to the 1850s. And currently, Anton is working through Volume 2. Anton, thank you so much for coming on and sharing some of your research and discoveries with myself and the audience.
Thank you, Matt. It's great to be with you and to hear such fulsome praise of my work. I'm definitely giving my life to it. So here we are.
Yeah, you definitely walked the walk and you earned it. So, like that being said, you've brought something very, very, I think, special as a unique analysis or way of approaching things. A lot of people are very much inclined to oversimplify their analysis of the past, either by painting the USA and its from its early days onward as a colonial oppressive nature, which has only destroyed natives who were living here, who only had this very imperial Pax Americana spirit that was never really thus legitimate because it was always based on pillage, slavery, very cynical view. And then there's an opposing school that says, no, it was all legitimate. The weak should be necessarily replaced by the strong, that manifest destiny has always been this one good thing. There's nothing bad to criticize about America. And there's obviously a truth which is lost in this false debate and schism. Now, you've brought across the fact that there is this other way of thinking, and it really shapes your entire analysis. And I was hoping you could maybe just introduce quickly, what is this healthier other path that you've figured out or have learned to use as you analyze the battles and the clashes of these different schools shaping America's past?
Well, I started with the understanding that there is a vital value in the accomplishments of our industrial civilization that the world needs desperately. The world needs the electricity, the capabilities, the power. People can't be safe, or they can't do anything now. They won't survive without this. And so I studied how this came about. How did we get these capabilities? And I found that the evildoers of the world never built them, that it came from people with a better intention. So then in the United States, there were tremendous accomplishments that aided mankind, especially this industrial capability that was spread around the world. To a certain extent. And then there were also crimes committed by America. And going deeper into it, you see these two sides inside the country. One we've talked about before, the American system, people who believed in the progress of the country and the progress of mankind. And the other side is transatlantic powers, people, financiers, and people affiliated with especially the British Empire. So this is my approach to discover what the Americans, in the best sense of that term, the ones who wanted that progress, who fought for that progress, wanted to do, what they accomplished, and what was the battle on the both sides all the way through. So I wanted to talk today a bit about the settlement of the West, which occurs mainly after the Civil War. I'm talking about the Mountain West going out to the Pacific, but particularly I'll focus on the Mountain West. So
you mean like the Alleghenies around the original 13 colonies, kind of, or you mean like the Mountain West, like Colorado and the Rockies?
You're talking about, yes, a good question. The Rocky Mountains. This is after you pass the Mississippi, you're in the Great Plains. The Great Plains go up to the Rocky Mountains. Now you're in Colorado, Idaho, Montana, down to New Mexico, maybe Arizona. And in this area, there was a settlement by the Americans going west after the Civil War. And I want to focus on a particular very progressive man, progressive in the best sense. It's a somewhat distorted idea today. His name is William J. Palmer, and he's the most famous developer of Colorado. He founded Colorado Springs. He built the industries of Colorado. He developed the railroads there. Earlier, he was a Medal of Honor winner in the Civil War. He was a civilian who joined the Army, Quaker. Actually, he hated war and killing, so it was a tough decision. But he's a brave man. He during the war, he went against war crimes committed by his own by Union troops, and he actually shot a couple of guys in a gun battle when they were abusing Southern civilians. But anyway, so this man worked with the Pennsylvania Railroad, with the Nationalists in Philadelphia. It's a whole big story. And he went out west, and his strategy for the West, this is what's important. And this is the strategy going back to Lincoln and Henry Carey, and really all the way to the founding for the best Americans. And that is, you want to build up family farms and industries, the modern, really heavy industries, steel mills. And you want to build beautiful cities and towns along the Rocky Mountains. The resources, which are abundant there, and minerals, and there's water resources too, if you carefully deal with that. But the resources would be used in the region to build up an industrial and agricultural civilization with millions of settlers who would be independent and skilled people, cultured people. There was an enemy strategy for the region by the Boston and New York and London financiers and corporations that they ran. And their strategy was to have huge tracts of land taken over by people who would strip off the resources and sell them. Land speculators, cattle barons, timber barons, international mining interests. And they would have an underclass who were uneducated and just vulnerable, and the region would never be developed. So he built a beautiful set of institutions in Colorado, but then he ran into, we run into in the story, the question of the American Indians who were there before these people went out and settled this area. So in 1880, after he had done tremendous development in Colorado, by the way, he fought against the imperialists, literally. In other words, his railroad, he attempted to build his railroad all the way to Mexico City. And his railroad was the Denver and Rio Grande. And the enemy, the Santa Fe Railroad, tried to cut him off going east-west. He's building south from Denver. And he actually did build the Mexican National Railways in cooperation with the Mexican nationalists. But this other railroad cut him off. And the guy that ran that other railroad, Thomas Jefferson Coolidge, his family made their money in the opium trade in China. And then this fellow himself started the United Fruit Company that pillaged Central America and really led to the terrible chaos that's there now and poverty. So that is the
wow. And is there any relationship to Calvin Coolidge, or is that just
no,
a coincidental
it was a distant
name?
relation, except that he let those people into power when he was president. He
Okay,
was
so you're saying, just to recapitulate, this individual represented the power interest that he directly brought online United Fruit at the same time as he was creating these.
No, a little bit later. United Fruit was more towards the turn of the century. We're talking here in the 1870s and 80s. So now,
okay,
into this place, Colorado Springs, a beautiful, picturesque community that Palmer founded, comes a lady from Boston named Helen Hunt. And she's a writer, very talented, but she's not particularly, interested in these underclasses of any kind. And she married in Colorado Springs Palmer's partner, a guy named William Jackson. And she became Helen Hunt Jackson. And he, being a Quaker like Palmer, he's well off as a businessman, a railroad guy, but he was running the Underground Railroad in his community back east, like Palmer. Palmer was a fabulous abolitionist. So they fought for black rights. And so he encouraged his new wife to care about the disadvantaged and the underclasses. He didn't particularly pay attention to the Indians. So she went back east after she married him. She went back east and attended a lecture by a very famous Indian at the time. His name's Standing Bear. And he was from the Ponca tribe from Nebraska. Gave a lecture series in Boston and elsewhere. And he told the story of his tribe having been in Nebraska and being displaced by settlers after the federal government had promised they could keep the land. They were displaced and they were shifted about mercilessly. One treaty after another was broken with them. They were moved down to Oklahoma, to the Indian Territory, and then it was barren and they couldn't farm there. They had been farmers in Nebraska. They were chased off their lands. These are not just, nomads, right? So they broke out of the reservation in Oklahoma and were walking up north back to Nebraska. And they were on the orders of the President Hayes and the Secretary of the Interior, Carl Schurz, a terrible man. They were arrested and put in a prison of a stockade, Western stockade. They tried to break out of there. They were recaptured and massacred and shot down in a ditch. So this guy, this is a famous thing. John Ford made a movie about this, Cheyenne Autumn. So what happened is they went to federal court with some help from people in Nebraska, and they won a famous federal court decision that Indians are people under the law. And I'm not going to. I don't have time to go into this any deeper. But Helen Jackson went back to Colorado Springs and wrote. She spent time in New York and researched some of the same places I did my research. And she wrote a fabulous book called A Century of Dishonor about the abuse and of the Indians in the United States from the very founding. And the way this works is that people, the government will make a treaty, and often it is people of goodwill who make that treaty. And the treaty says, well, we're going to reserve land for you, and that will be your land. And the Congress and the president, Washington, told the Indians in the Northwest Territory, going back to 1787, we're reserving this land. We're gonna have settlers coming out there, but this part of that area is yours. And if any white man goes on there without the permission of federal authorities, you can do with him as you want. That was said again and again, and the government always forgot about it. But those are promises.
Let's hold this in mind, and we're gonna shift gears very, very briefly as we go into a few little commercials. A word from our sponsors on TNTRadio.live, and then we're gonna come back to continue this story soon.
TNT Radio's James Freeman.
We have new revised figures from the Office for National Statistics showing that legal, that's not illegal, that's legal, net migration to the UK has witnessed one of the largest increases on record. 750,000 additional people are now living in the UK in the space of just 1 year. A huge number that comes just 3 years after we left the European Union. Now, I didn't vote for Brexit because of immigration. I voted because of democracy. But millions did vote because they think too many people are coming into the country, which makes what the government has allowed to happen an absolute two fingers up to the people and democracy. Another example, if we needed another, of how the government does the exact opposite to what the people want and vote for.
The Freeman Report and James Freeman on today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
Affordable housing, we can build that. Sustainable housing, we can build that. At MIT Modular, we understand the importance of housing for all and the importance of design, cost, and functionality. Our goal is to meet the needs of our growing population by converting shipping containers to livable units. If you're like-minded and in a position to invest in something meaningful and life-changing, we want to hear from you. We are a team of professional architects, engineers, and financial and tax experts dedicated to offering unique solutions that provide a brighter future. Our Opportunity Zone Fund offers investors both real estate and operating business diversification, 5-year tax deferral on capital gains, annual tax benefits, and ultimately tax-free appreciation potential. There are opportunity zones all over America. If you're interested in learning more about our services, need affordable housing, or want to participate in creating a new vision for tomorrow, give us a call in the U.S. on 385-985-5702. Or read more at mitmodular.com. MIT Modular. We can build that.
We don't rock, we talk. Today's News Talk, TNT Radio.
So we're back with the second segment for the first hour with Anton Chaitkin. We were just going through certain very important concepts of history to hold in mind for anybody trying to make sense of the present. Obviously, context is everything, so history is a really important place to learn how to navigate. The problem, obviously, is that it is littered with dishonesty, misinformation, people who are just making mistakes and they didn't even realize it because they have their own bag of blind assumptions that they're bringing into their own analysis and publishing books and whatever. So it's really important to have a principle, a guiding star that one can look at as a universal that we can hold on to as we cut through. Well, what do we keep? What do we throw away? Anton was getting across the importance of recognizing the power of industrial progress, that this was never given to anybody. It was never given to mankind by an oligarchy. This was always fought for every step of the way. And sometimes there's challenges, like the fact that there are already people living in North America and South America and Central America. There are already people who were here for a very long time. Now the question is, for a civilization which is much more industrially and scientifically at a higher level, what do you do when you encounter these people with their own cultures, their own languages, their own stories, their own beautiful cultural traditions that are already here? Obviously, a dishonest person can take advantage of their position on that technological improved platform and abuse, extinguish, do all sorts of things to hurt and the weaker groupings. However, Anton was getting across that there is a much more beautiful, good intention current that is often lost in the mix within America that had a very different view of interfacing with the natives. And so, Anton, I'll just let you continue, but I have a question before we get back on the path.
Sure.
What do you say to people who assert that the best we could do is just leave the natives alone, and anything that we would try to do would be destructive? If we tried to share our technology with natives, that would be disruptive and thus destructive to their traditions. The best we could do is just leave them alone. And how do you respond to that very popular way of thinking that maybe the reservation system is the way to go, and just actually abiding by the reservation system would be the only viable pathway for North America or other cultures as well?
It's avoiding the actual history of the thing. Teddy Roosevelt, later the president, a terrible president of the United States, imperialist, racist, back in 1889, wrote a book called Winning of the West. And in that book, he attacks Helen Hunt Jackson for writing this book that I'm talking about. It was very famous at the time. This whole story was famous, and it's lost in the mists of time because of the fact that Helen Jackson was pro-Christian and pro-American. And she's writing this condemnation of what America was doing. Does that ring a bell with people? I'm pro-American, and I condemn what the United States is doing in the world now. And you can't really make a serious attack on what the U.S. and Britain are doing, criminally doing in the world. You can't understand what you're talking about unless you cherish what the USA in particular has accomplished in the world and is betraying dishonorably by what they're doing now. So what Teddy Roosevelt lied about, and what's in her book, is that as the people went west in the early days into the Midwest and later into the far West, they encountered Indians. And in many cases, the initial encounter was friendly. And when they made arrangements to say, you are living on a certain amount of land, you don't need 1 million square miles, but you can have this 10,000 square miles for your tribe, or this 1,000 square miles. That's your land. That's your traditional land. You're farming there. Maybe there's some hunting there. The buffalo is not going to be the vast herds, but reserving this land. And the Indians very often wanted to get the latest technology for agriculture and saw the advantage of having an upgrade in their powers. Remember that people all over the Americas, going down to Central America and recently discoveries in Brazil and the Amazon, people built cities for thousands of years.
Right.
That's so anyway, what specifically happened was that treaties were made to reserve lands. And in the treaties, it said, we're going to give you the technology and assistance you need because we are breaking apart your old means of living. So we owe you a helping hand to join our civilization. And then they didn't do it. They didn't give that helping hand. There was no serious attempt to assimilate the American natives. That's the problem. So now let me go. First of all, I want to read a little, just a short excerpt from Lincoln.
I would just say one thing before you read the excerpt from Lincoln is that the very word itself means something different in the Star Trek modern era. That we know about characters like the Borgs in Star Trek that say you will be assimilated, resistance is futile. That's a very different idea than the type of thoughts associated with the word that you're using, which didn't involve simply destroying the humanity of a people as they're absorbed into a automata empire. It's a very different idea, right? Because you're saying it in such a manner that they won't lose their cultural identities, but at the same time they will take part in the something more universal as well, that involves appreciating, assimilating technological progress and things that have benefited Western civilization, so-called, at the same time.
Well, okay. So first of all, in our world, unless you have the power of building industry and refining metals and replenishing the soil and using a small area to produce a lot of food and enrich the soil, unless you have these technologies, you're not going to be independent. You'll lose independence to imperialists. You have to. So I'll give you an example. This has to do with the respect for the other people that don't have those yet. So we made a treaty after the Civil War with China. It's called the Burlingame Treaty. And this was on the basis of respect for China. Lincoln sent an ambassador, Burlingame, there, and they sent Burlingame back as their ambassador to make this treaty. This was an 1868 treaty, and it said that the U.S. will not tell China when to have a railroad. You're not going to go and build railroads and you run them and stuff. But when we decide that we want a railroad and we ask you for help, you will provide engineers and assistants. And that's in the treaty. Get the flavor of this. This is an ancient civilization that is encountering the modern world and wants to be independent. They can't be independent if they're at the mercy of people who have higher technology. And the whole thing is based on respect for them. The same thing was going on with the South. We should have done this with the South after the Civil War, to respect the people of the South, black and white, and say, we want to rebuild the South from the war in your interest. That means no more cotton plantations. What you need is industry and high wage jobs and high profit agriculture that's family farms, not sharecroppers. Everybody benefits. And we're not going to do it with troops. You would have 90% of the people behind that in the South. Peacefully. Respect. This is a Confucian notion, right? We have to learn really from China in this. That's Confucius and Mencius. Respect for the other people. This goes back to ancient Greece. They had the same thing. So Lincoln said that no people who have this power of concentrated scientific agriculture that comes from in our civilization, no people that have that will ever be oppressed by money kings, crown kings, or land kings. And he said that the real problem that causes wars is that people do not have sympathy with strangers. And that is the cause of the wars in our world. And that's the cause right there. The sympathy, the respect for the other people. You can learn from these other. We learned from the American Indians. They had something to teach us. But this respect was gone. There was fear on both sides. There were massacres on both sides, but far more massacres of the Indians by the whites. How do you solve this? With respect and with honoring your treaties. There's plenty of land in America for everybody. There weren't that many Indians in North America. They could have thousands of square miles. We're not saying that the Indians were going to be the national owners of North America. What we're saying is that when they occupy land, that's their land. And if you want to get that land from them, you have to pay good money and assist them to have a living in a better way. And that wasn't done. People were just robbed. It's a difference between occupation of land and having sovereignty over a vast area. Those are two different things. And this is in Helen Jackson's book. So this is a matter of respect. And if you have respect for people, what do the people in Gaza need? They need respect. They need modern conditions. And what's happening to them now is really genocide. They're being bombed mercilessly. The war is spreading. And this is the present policy of the United States of America. Yes, it's being done through Israel. Crazy people in Israel who are undoubtedly, they would have to be more and more insane day after day for the kind of retribution that will fall on them. But this is a U.S. policy to have these wars. And we are repeating the kind of internal crime and disaster that was the blot on our national honor from these early days. We should have developed the West the way Palmer wanted to do it. We ended up with having cowboys and Indians and shoot 'em ups and saloons and prostitutes and mining interests from Europe running this whole damn thing. And this is our disaster. But we did develop our country in a way that ought to be shared with respect with other countries. So your Borgs just didn't have any respect for the people. If they have a superior civilization, prove that it's superior because you have respect for people. Otherwise, you're just an ancient pagan empire that is doomed.
Yeah. I really appreciate that clarification. I think it's so important that people learn that to just think in those nuanced terms, because, and as you pointed out, it's so important today, not just because of the wrongs that are reverberating multi-generationally into the current present situation in North America, but as you just rightfully pointed out, there's parallels to what's going on in the Middle East, in the Gaza, in Israel, and the idea of the chosen people, the superior people doctrine is the same sort of poison that caused or justified so much destruction in America's past of the exceptional nation, right? That really lends itself to a lot of arrogance at the expense of anybody else who is thus inferior, and thus, because they're inferior, you have the right to do with them as you see fit. And what we see now with the worst expression of Zionism, with the same chosen people, greater Israel sort of self-delusionism, which is taking people who have been living in subjugation in the Gaza, in the West Bank, and